Welcome to the Empowered Women Life Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Karen Bashford. This podcast is for every woman who has ever felt limited by her past, silenced by trauma, or held back by society's expectations. Each week, we will share powerful stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you become the leader of your own life. It's been an interesting couple of weeks for me, and I've been sitting here debating what to talk about. And I've often shared things about my life and the experiences I've had and how it's impacted my life. But today I want to talk about something that perhaps we need to acknowledge more of, and that's exhaustion. Now, I shared on LinkedIn article about exhaustion and how it can impact you. However, I'm also conscious there's more to exhaustion than perhaps we even consider. So why do we get exhausted? Well, for me, there's several reasons. In particular, emotional exhaustion. Some of you may know that I have a 25-year-old cat, and over the last 2-3 weeks, she developed a serious illness. Now, she's been my rock. She has been through everything with me for the last 13 years now. And when you suddenly realize that that rock is potentially getting close to end of life, it's like, I can't cope with this. And then things like self-sabotage step in. You abandon yourself even. And that's what I came to realize for the last couple of weeks is I was so fearful of losing her that I actually abandoned myself and I sabotaged my life. That's not hard to do at times, I must admit. I can do that very easily. However, probably because of why I was aware of what's going on for me, it highlighted a lot of things that perhaps I would have normally ignored, such as feeling exhausted when I got up. That's so unusual for me. I normally can go to bed, I have a really good night's sleep, and then I'm up and about of a morning. But these last few weeks hasn't been like that at all. I've gone to bed earlier, which is very, very unusual. I'm normally one of those that goes to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and it can take me forever to get to bed. But this week, especially, I've been going to bed at 9 o'clock, even slightly earlier than that. I've not had the motivation to keep working and doing things I needed to do for myself or the business. I've done the essentials, basically. I've also been conscious of the fact that my interest in anything has been somewhat reduced. And when I say anything, I mean reading, studying programs on YouTube or videos on YouTube that can help me grow and expand my knowledge. Even the Chinese that I enjoy listening to and watching, that was put aside. The feeling that I couldn't be bothered even to organise my breakfast and my lunch and my evening meal effectively went out the window. I literally was picking. I tried to be good, but that wasn't always successful. I really did eat way too much to the point where at times my stomach actually hurt because I had eaten too much. Now, what I'm describing is a classical case of when you self-sabotage, you abandon yourself, when you are literally exhausted to the point where your mind is going, I can't deal with this. Really don't want to deal with this. And interestingly enough, though, physically, I wasn't doing too bad, although I had stopped a lot of my exercise because it was like too much hard work. Even though I enjoy exercising, it was, oh, do I really have to do this? And yet when I did bother to do it, I enjoyed it and it made me feel better. Why do we do it though? And that's something that I pondered. Why did I not sleep well? What was I thinking of while I was in a state of in between sleeping and waking? But I wasn't actually dreaming. It was like my mind was trying to figure things out. And even at times when I was conscious of what I was dreaming, it was like it was taking me back to times when I felt, what's the word I want? I felt unworthy, confused, uncertain. It wasn't a case of I wasn't good enough. It was a case of I was facing things that I was dreaming about previously that had made me feel separate, I suppose, separate from the world I had lived in and the world I'm living in now, because there is definitely a line between how I used to live and how I live now. So it was like my mind was taking me back to remind me of those times when outwardly I would appear confident. I wouldn't necessarily be very happy, but I would appear confident. And yet it was almost as if it was reminding me that despite everything, I got through that and I survived it and I grew from it. So it was like these last 2-3 weeks have been a case of, well, even though you're going through this, even though you're going through these challenging times, even though you're facing a situation where you're very much aware that the rock of your life, your cat, could die, you're still capable. You're still able to get on and do things. And you can survive it. So there was that aspect to the last couple of weeks. I was also aware that I was racking my brains for ideas on how I could help my cat, obviously, and what I could do to improve the situation. Unfortunately, Safi had chronic sickness and diarrhea and cystitis. That lovely problem where you desperately need to go to the loo, even if you've got nothing to go on, and it can be painful. Now, obviously, I can't tell unless she was crying at me whether it was painful or not, but she was certainly distressed, and so was I. And everything that was happening to her made me feel hopeless and helpless because I had no idea how to help her. Obviously, I took her to the vets, and initially the prognosis was gastroenteritis. You know, keep an eye on her, keep using the homeopathic remedies, and she'll get better. she did, sort of, and then she went downhill again. And again, it was another visit to the vets, and this time they took blood tests. And she had an overactive thyroid, which meant her body was being flooded with hormones that were causing the gastroenteritis and cystitis. Now, that's treatable. But I wasn't willing to use drugs on her because I never have done, partly because of my own experience from being poisoned with drugs, but partly because I believe that if the body is given sufficient information, it can work far more effectively than any artificial drugs could. So I then had to work out what I needed to give her to actually get her better. And isn't it amazing how, with that intention, things started to fall in place? I did research about an overactive thyroid and homeopathic remedies. And one site I came across, obviously, they don't tell you very much about animals, but they do tell you an awful lot about humans. And one site actually mentioned nat mur for felines as something to use if they have an overactive thyroid. Now, that was the site for humans, and it was a site that was mentioning that research had been done to assess the different capabilities of the different homeopathic remedies that are recommended for the treatment of thyroids. So there it was in black and white, what I could use for her. Obviously, every animal, every person is different. So it was a case of, well, let's just try this. And it's a bit like life. You have to try something to find out whether it's going to work for you or not. So there I was, having an argument with her, popping tablets down her throat. She wasn't impressed, but her nibbles were a positive outcome for her. She would take the tablet and then she'd have some nibbles. And the amazing thing about it was within a couple of days, I could see a difference. She wasn't well, she was still quite ill, but there was a difference. And it's starting to see the little differences that were occurring. She started to come and say hello to me, whereas before she just went and hid or stayed very quiet, in the bedroom, on the bed, or under a chair in there. She wouldn't be coming to see me. She'd normally sleep with me of a night time, and she wasn't doing that. And yet, all of a sudden, she was managing to jump on the bed and just come and say hello to me. Didn't sleep, but she just come and said hello to me. So there's those little changes we can notice. And that's the same with our lives. When something begins to change, we see little differences. I noticed that once I stopped worrying so much about it because I could see the difference, I started to plan and take action again. I still wasn't really ready to go back full time into the business, but there was a definite movement of improvement. I was more focused. I was doing things that I deliberately avoided. I was not interested. There was no motivation. I have networking that I can go with, in-person networking I can go to. And before she became ill, I'd done some research to find out where they were and when they were on. Now, I could have easily booked them, but actually something inside me said, no, don't book yet. You're not motivated and you don't want to book them if you're not going to go. But then I started realizing that I needed to book things that I wanted to do. I needed to start doing the research for opportunities to get into magazines, newspapers, or being interviewed, or even just responding to journalist requests that I'd postponed because there was, I don't want to do this situation. And it's surprising, in just a very few days for myself, with Safi starting to get better, there was an improvement in myself. Now, having been through a nervous breakdown, I know how long it can take to recover. But because I chose to listen to how I was feeling, to what was being in my, what do I want to use? What word do I want to use? Life, I suppose. The things that were happening in my life, the changes that had taken place because my cat wasn't ill, the extra things I had to do for her, like obviously empty her litter tray, give her the tablets, do the research for her, take her to the vets. It was those little things that impacted my life and how I felt emotionally and physically. But I could see those changes. Some of them were minor, some of them you wouldn't have really thought about. But because I was aware of how I respond to situations, like the extra snacking, the wrong food, like the loss of interest in things other than worrying about my cat, I knew that as soon as I found the answers for her, my life would start reversing back to how it was. Now, that would be a different matter if she'd actually continued to be seriously ill and deteriorated even more. You might not have seen me on this video if that, or this podcast, heard me on this podcast if that was the case. Because I know for her, I will be crying. I will be very, very upset. Because she has been part of my life for so long, and 24/7, apart from an occasional holiday and perhaps a day out, she has been a consistent part of my life. So I do know how I'm going to react. I could see it already in how I was behaving, just dealing with the fact she was deteriorating and I hadn't got the answers yet. So self-sabotage, self-abandonment will occur at certain times of your life because of things that are happening in your life. Now, self-abandonment means you ignore everything that's relevant that you know you can do and are aware you need to do to keep your life stable, to keep yourself safe and secure, to help your health, to improve your ability to do things and to keep your focus. Whereas self-sabotage is things like procrastination, of ignoring things that you know need to be done, but just haven't got the energy or desire to do them. So there is a difference. But as I said, once you start realizing that actually things are improving for you, you can start to notice the differences that are occurring. Self-leadership is about being aware of who you are. And I am conscious of the messages that are being pushed out at the moment that say everything starts with the question, who am I? For me, that doesn't feel enough. You need to ask, who have I been and who do I want to be? Because the who have I been has an impact with who am I, which in turn then has an impact on who do I want to be. So because I've done that, who have I been, and I'm aware of who am I know who I want to be. And during these few weeks, I haven't been who I want to be. And that's understandable. Emotionally, I was exhausted. I was only too conscious of what was happening in my life. And our emotions fluctuate considerably. Our stress levels increase when we're feeling threatened by something. And the loss of Safi would be a threat to my happiness, basically. So yes, my stress levels increased. When you know yourself, you can catch the warning signs. Yes, I was very much aware that I was eating too much. But I didn't stop myself because I didn't have the energy to do so. I didn't have that desire, the motivation to do so. It was easier to just leave it be and just let it go. Any more than I didn't choose to take action in the way I could have done in my business, because my conscious awareness would not have been effective. I would have landed up sitting there staring at the screen or making silly little mistakes. I did notice that I become slightly accident prone. I did stupid things because I was distracted. I literally flooded my kitchen top because I pushed the button for my coffee machine to do a mug of coffee and forgot to switch it off. So you do silly little things like that, because even though you're consciously aware of what's going on around you, unconsciously your body is going and your mind is going, I don't want to deal with this. So you don't pay attention. You become distracted. And you make those mistakes. You do the silly things. You procrastinate. You feel overwhelmed. You step back and ignore everything. And that's perfectly understandable. You don't need to criticize yourself. You don't need to blame or shame yourself because that is the case. But the one thing I'm only too conscious of is the fact that we do tend to shame ourselves. We criticize ourselves. We blame ourselves. We make ourselves feel guilty because we're not doing the things that we think we should be doing. But that isn't what life is about. Life is about allowing yourself to go through the range of emotions, of vulnerability, of, what's the word? Come on, what's the word? Confusion. And that's fine, because that's who we need to be. We're not robots. We have emotions, and we can hurt. So the next time something in your life happens and you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't feel that you can deal with everything that needs to be dealt with. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with the people around you that you're not having a good time, that you're struggling. I very much believe that everyone is willing to give you time and space to deal with what's going on for you. But they can only do so if they're aware of what is going on. You don't have to give specific details. You can just say, hey, it's not a good week for me, or something like that. But in them knowing, they can actually support you in their own way. And that doesn't mean a conversation. That doesn't mean to actually have to ask you questions or anything like that. That means that they can be aware that perhaps it's not a good time to push for an answer or to expect somebody to respond to a message. And in understanding and showing kindness to yourself and receiving, it makes it so much easier to deal with, in my case, my cat. In your case, it could be a situation with your family. It could be a work issue. It could be anything. But having the courage to admit to yourself that you're not doing well, to see the warning signs and acknowledge them and allow yourself the space that you need to get through whatever you're needing to get through will enable you to come out the other side without potential health issues. Because when we're overstressed, when we're really worried about something, our health does deteriorate. We could land up with a really bad flu, COVID even, or a really bad cold, sore throat. It could be that we get stomach issues that drain us. Our health and our mental, physical, and emotional well-being is our top priority. And this last week, apart from having a stomach that goes, I'm full, I haven't done bad. I've actually gone through this fairly well, considering, for which I am grateful. So I hope today's podcast helps you understand the importance of knowing yourself, appreciating why you behave as you do and why you react as you do, and actually be kind to yourself, even in those moments when normally you'd be criticizing and blaming yourself. That's it for this week. Have a good week and take care.